Welcome to the RCAP USA Roundup, a podcast where we have real conversations affecting both cattle producers and beef consumers. We're your hosts, Jaden Moreland and
Karina Jones.
With that, let's get to today's episode. Today it is becoming more and more common for kids to not return to the ranch as adults. Why are kids not returning to the ranch? What are the struggles young ranchers are facing? What are the next generation's thoughts on hot button industry topics like the checkoff? Why should young ranchers be involved in the conversation? We answer these questions and more with two young ranchers, Patrice Stewart and Claire McKay. Today we have on with us Patrice and Claire. So if y'all want to give us a quick introduction, where are you from? How are you involved in the ranching industry? Just tell us about yourself. Let's start with you, Patrice.
Hi, I'm Patrice Stewart. I'm from Paradise Valley, Nevada. I help my mom own and operate the Stewart's 96 Ranch, which is the oldest ranch in Nevada, still in the same family. I went to Treasure Valley Community College in Ontario, Oregon, was part of Wade Black's horse program, so I have a degree in ranch management and horse production. And I also own and operate Stewart's Performance Horses, where I raise and train quality ranch and performance horses.
Very cool. What about you, Claire?
So my name is Claire McKay. I work and help my family on the McKay Ranch in Ventura, Oregon. That's pretty much, I'm basically a glorified ranch hand. If you ask my dad and brothers, I can do everything from train a colt to build a fence. I went to school. I actually did do a year at TVCC, but I didn't graduate from there. I went to school in Southern California and studied communications media, which is just a really fancy way of saying I'm a filmmaker. And then I have my own media company called American Dreams Media, which focuses specifically on telling the stories of ranchers and farmers and really anyone in the ag industry, just trying to get information out there about what we do, why it's important people know what we do. So that's kind of my story.
Very cool. Well, we're happy to have you all on today. So diving into those questions, in today's world, we are getting further and further removed from production agriculture. Fewer people are familiar with it, and those that did grow up on a ranch are choosing not to come back. So tell us why you chose to come back to the ranch. And in your opinion, what are some of the drivers of young people not returning to the ranch?
I came back to the ranch because this life is really all I've ever wanted to do. And I was able to go to a program that I was able to bring back a skill that I could add horses to this as a second income. And I see a lot of kids, their families kind of push them into this life, so they kind of resent it. And they see more money in a different industry instead of coming back.
So I came back to the ranch because, for one, it was home, and I felt like it was the place I needed to be after I graduated. Even though I did have a degree in media, ranching was that thing that was just second nature. I think a lot of kids don't come back to the ranch for the reason I left it initially. And that was because at 20 years old, I was just burnt out. When you grow up in that lifestyle, it's the same thing day in, day out. And it's not that I don't love ranching. It's just that I'm the kind of person where I need to have something else going on to give me kind of a break from that constant day in, day out, just regular working, which I love to do. But I think a lot of kids don't come back to the ranch because of that burnout. You just get so tired of the repetitiveness. And then you've got the lucky kids who it's in their blood. Like, that's their thing. But now I've learned to be able to marry the two industries that I'm in, which is media and ranching, and make them work for and with each other. And realizing that I can, in fact, do both. I don't know if everybody is as lucky to find that. But that's one of the reasons I came back to the ranch as well, was to help in the way that I knew that I could. Physically, yes, with working on the ranch, but also in this avenue that a lot of ranchers are not familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of there's some other reasons of it's a hard industry to get started in, especially if the ranch already is barely breaking even. And then to bring in another person to be able to support on that ranch is hard. But also, I mean, starting from scratch in this industry right now is almost impossible. And a lot of kids just don't see it as a viable option to make money anymore. So, what empowers you as a young rancher and what drives you to continue staying on the ranch and to continue working in the industry?
I definitely feel pride in the fact that, hey, I raise beef and I help feed our nation and the world. My dad always told me, and it kind of goes back to like what Claire said, it's just in our blood, that you gotta love the romance and the way of life, because you're not gonna make $1 million at being a cattle rancher. You have to love it and love being able to work outside and work with your hands and raise something that helps feed a lot of people.
So I'm going to piggyback off that. There's an incredible amount of pride growing up in this industry and the people that you get to meet and that you grow up with. A quote that you'll read in random places is the quickest way to become $1 million rancher is to start with $2 million. But it's a fact, it's a lifestyle you absolutely have to love because it's grueling. It's 3:00 in the morning pulling calves. It's having to feed in a blizzard. You really have to love the industry, love what you're doing, have respect for what you're doing, and some respect for yourself and everybody else who's doing it with you. For me personally, as far as what empowers me to continue doing it is because being a rancher is what's given me the confidence and courage to even be something else. Because I started in a place where I had to work for everything that I wanted, and I saw what it looked like to work for everything that you wanted. I've watched my dad create his dream ranch, and being able to see that is so inspirational. It tells me that if I keep working at it and if I love whatever it is I'm doing enough, I can accomplish that goal. And it's not going to be easy. At the end of the day, you're going to have spilled a lot of probably blood, sweat, and tears. It's going to be an emotional journey. But at the end of it, that ability to inspire kids in any industry, people in any industry, I think that starts with an industry like the ranching and ag industries, because these people are some of the toughest, hardest working people you'll ever meet, which may be a biased opinion, but it's hard work. And if they can do it for as little reward as they get at the end of it, you can do anything.
Your generation, more than most that we have seen in the past, is facing some incredible challenges, especially to enter into the cattle industry. Talk to us about what those challenges are and how you're overcoming those challenges.
I am not in any way trying to be offensive to especially the younger generation, but this is what I've seen as a young rancher, and this is one of the biggest struggles that I have come across. So I did a project last year called the Graze and Save Project, where I went around for pretty much the whole summer and just talked to ranchers and different people in the ag industry, kind of about the struggles that they're dealing with. One of the biggest struggles, I think, for a young rancher is that we are raised, first of all, by a generation that's all about work. Just nose to the grind, getting it done day in and day out. And that is an amazing way to be, except when you're in an industry that's now run by people who don't understand the amount of work you have to put into a day. And the way that I've been trying to overcome the struggle of, it's not so much ignorance as it's just not knowing where to go for certain pieces of information, is I've been getting up and going to things like the RCAF convention. I go to meetings, I sit down with my local representatives and talk to them, because we can work our butts off all day, but at the end of the day, we're not making any headway because we're not the ones in control, if that makes any sense. And we need at least to have a seat at the table listening to that conversation. But that starts with us doing that research and going out and asking those questions and getting that information from the people who are out there essentially guiding our entire lives without knowing what it is that we do. It's one thing to get up at 6:00 in the morning and go for 12, 16 hours a day and come home and know that you've done something. It's a whole other thing to try to explain to somebody who's sitting in freaking New York why we do that and how hard that is, and that we deserve to be, paid for, in accordance with how hard we work. And I think as far as industries go, we're one of the most underpaid people, in the world. That's the biggest struggle I have seen, is just young people not knowing where to go to ask questions or even get their voices heard or even know what questions to ask. Because we wake up like our parents do, and we go out and we work, and we come back and we look at the books at the end of the year and we're like, what the heck? It's like, well, if you look up above you, Like there's a whole trickle down system and it gets to you and they're like, here's some pennies, good job. Like that's how it feels to me anyway. So what I've been doing is just trying to be as educated as possible and then bringing that back to my family, to my friends, and be like, here's what's going on and here's what we can do. But you have to light the fire under them, and that's what's hard to do if you don't like start fighting back kind of on their battlefield a little bit. So you got to just kind of gain those skills, and it's not easy, but that would be my biggest piece of advice, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do. So
that's a really good answer, Claire, and honestly not what I was expecting you to say. And so, but it really has me thinking about some things. Patrice, what do you think your challenges are as a young producer?
It's hard for us to get loans for cattle and all that kind of stuff because they're like, oh, you're young, you're just out of college or whatever it is. Yes, I was very fortunate that I'm the only child of my family, so I got to come back to the ranch. But a lot of people, even if you want to come back, they may have 3, 5 siblings, whatever it is, and you can't make that work on a ranch, so they have to go out, try to find land that they can lease, they can buy, whatever, and that is hard because you can't get a loan for it, or you can't make it pencil with how much cattle prices are so low now.
So let's talk about some industry issues. Patrice, you had said earlier something that really piqued my interest about the pride you take in feeding this country. Tell me what your guys' opinion, perspective is of the fact that we have no way to differentiate our product in the marketplace with a mandatory country of origin label that shows where that beef in that grocery store was born, raised, and harvested. How does that make you feel as an American cattle producer that you are not allowed a way to differentiate your product, like say a tomato grower or an avocado grower in the US?
It definitely makes me mad because, we raise our cattle they're natural, they are completely safe for people to eat, and they're some of the best. But with how the mandatory cool is, you don't know that you're not getting beef from Mexico or wherever where they haven't eradicated hoof and mouth disease. You do not know that that is safe. And I truly do think that if we did have mandatory cool, the American consumer would say, I want to eat something that is healthy and safe for me instead of something that might have disease.
It's frustrating as, a cattle producer to not have that information out there. And the way that I look at it is, what's the difference between the cattle industry and having all of our beef, and not just the cattle industry, but the ag industry, and having all of our products labeled, and say the fashion industry? The more you know about an item, especially where it comes from, gives it prestige. It gives it an importance. So why can't we have that? Like, I would like people to know that the steak they're eating in some 3-star Michelin restaurant came from my family's ranch or came from America. That leads right back to the pride thing. Like, I'm proud of what we do. We also know where it's raised, how it's raised, what's in it, what's not in it. It's frustrating because I don't understand the thinking behind it, because we always want to know where everything comes from. But for some reason, in the cattle industry, that's the one industry where we're like, we really don't care. You're consuming that. That's a product that goes into your body. Wouldn't you want to know if it's the best possible product out there? Wouldn't you want to know the country it comes from and maybe what some of their issues are? I just want to, that'd be my question is what's the difference? Like, why can't we have that if other industries can have that? Why wouldn't you want to know where your product comes from and how it's raised?
Another industry topic that really affects your generation is the beef checkoff. It's been since 1985 since the American cattle producer was given an opportunity to vote on the beef checkoff. I didn't get to vote in 1985, so I'm really doubting that you ladies got to vote as well. Yet we are all forced to pay that mandatory tax. Do you feel like you have representation on the beef checkoff and how it is used?
They really just our money to lobby against like mandatory cool. They lobby against us, the cattle producer, and that they also use it to promote beef, but it's not like promoting US beef, which it's coming from the producers of US beef. It should be promoting our beef, not just beef as a whole.
I feel like the idea of the beef checkoff is good. The execution is very poor. Maybe when they created it, just like with every other, thing that starts out as like a good idea, it gets warped over time and it doesn't grow. And something like the beef checkoff, it needs to have grown with the generations that it's following, because like Patrice said, now you've taken what was probably started out as a decent idea and you've warped it to where you can use it against the initial, what it was designed for. So no, I don't believe that we're represented with it. I don't like the fact that you pay into something where that money is then used against you. It's essentially just like, well, it'd be like paying into like an arms dealer and having them turn around and shoot you with the gun. So I don't know how you would, essentially fix that, but I guarantee you there are a lot of people that don't like it because of the exact things that we mentioned. It's not helping. It's, if anything, it's throwing up every roadblock it possibly can right now for the American beef producer.
You brought up a really good point, that the beef industry has changed in 37 years. We have lost a lot of cattle producers. We have lost millions of head in our domestic cattle herd. Our domestic cattle herd is shrinking. In 1985, when the beef checkoff was implemented, producers like you and I received 57% of the consumer dollar, and today we receive 37%. So this program is no longer meeting the needs of the cattle industry, the people who pay into it. And you're right, reforms need to happen. So, as you guys have stated some really strong opinions about industry issues like MCOOL and the beef checkoff and your challenges of entering back into the industry, do you feel like your generation is heard by Big Ag in the grand scheme of the cattle industry?
I definitely don't think that they hear us or value us because they kind of see us as young and almost like uneducated in this industry. The only time that they will listen to something we're saying is if we are agreeing with everything that they say. And
I agree with Patrice. No, I don't think young people are heard by Big Ag. And for the exact same reason, I think they kind of look at us as, oh, you youngster. You child, you sit back and let the adults do this. Like, we're not stupid. We're paying very close attention to everything that goes on because we're living it and we're doing it. So no, actually, we're not dumb. And like Patrice said, they only care if we're agreeing. But the minute that you veer off, like that sheep doesn't have a clue what it's doing, or, let's not listen to that sheep that doesn't know. And that's very frustrating as a young producer because Patrice and I, we spend a lot of time doing research outside of the ranch. Like, whether it's politically or, just for the industry itself, we spend a decent amount of time trying to understand what the heck is going on collectively. And it's so insulting to not be heard because sometimes, we're not going to learn anything if we don't ask questions or if we don't go up against what somebody's saying. Like, I want you to break down for me why you think the way you think. Why does the beef checkoff work in your opinion? All right, now let me tell you where it doesn't work in mine. The idea is that you listen and then I listen and then we come to some sort of meeting point where it actually works for everybody. But if you just look at me like, congratulations, you've been on the ranch your whole life, but that doesn't mean you know what you're talking about, kid, then we're not going to get anywhere. So we're the ones who are doing the majority of the talking. We're the ones who need to be doing the majority of the talking, and Big Ag is not listening. And so we've got to do a better job of getting behind the microphone and either sitting down at that table.
It's interesting you say some of those things because it's actually something that us here at RCAF have recognized really is that your generation is really showing up and is interested in the topics, is engaged and wanting to engage. And Bill Bullard just recently spoke at Iowa State University to an audience of almost 250 young cattle producers who are involved in the beef production classes. And when I heard that that audience got that big, that they were that interested in what Bill had to say, that was really kind of a light bulb moment for me. And, Jaden as well. We are definitely seeing more engagement from your guys's generation. And we are seeing it in our convention numbers. And we're getting feedback from older generations that it's kind of invigorating them. It's re-energizing them because they see you all fighting, interested, getting in the trenches, and it's inspiring them to stay the course.
So like we talked about the beef checkoff earlier and how it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And more on that is beef consumption is down 20% from when the beef checkoff started. And so it's clear there's a disconnect between the producer and the consumer. And kind of like I said at the beginning, people are getting further and further removed from production ag. There's a lot less of, well, yeah, my grandpa used to ranch or he used to have a few cows. And there's more of, what do you mean beef doesn't come straight from the grocery store? And so if you were to sit down and have a conversation with a consumer who knew nothing about our industry, what are some of the things you would tell them about being in the cattle industry and being a young rancher?
I'd ask them what they do know. What do you know? What have you heard? Where do you get your information? And kind of then base the conversation off of that versus just assuming they know absolutely nothing. And then if they, prove to me that they knew absolutely nothing, then I could start that conversation. But I would definitely start with what do you think about ranchers? Like, what do you think about farmers? What do you think it is that we do? Where do you think your food comes from? I honestly, how do you think it's handled? Do you know what's in it? Do you know what's not in it? Like, where do you get your information? Because you're looking at an industry professional. I can tell you what I know. And if there's something I don't know, trust me, I have a string of people I can send you to that can tell you information. That's going to be more 100% than something you find on YouTube, something you find on Wikipedia. I promise you, if you go to the producer, you're going to learn a lot more.
Kind of what Claire said, that we got to tell consumers that we are not the people that are destroying the planet. We are trying to keep it going because our livelihoods depend on it. And we are not these people that go out and torture animals. Like, we truly do love these animals. And they also kind of need to know, hey, once this industry is gone, it's gone for good. We're not going to get ranching back if we completely destroy it.
So to add something else to that question, what do y'all think is the key to improving that disconnect? Like, take the beef checkoff out of it. How do we as young ranchers improve that disconnect to consumers? What's the tool to communicate with them?
I definitely think social media is a great tool because a lot of young people, that's what they're on. They're on Facebook, they're on Snapchat, TikTok, whatever it is. And we got to get our information out there. And as young ranchers, we can use those kind of things that the older generation didn't have or don't quite understand. We can use TikTok and all those to get our information out.
So now I'm going to ask the question, because this is kind of morphing, coming full circle. So do you feel that it is the beef checkoff's job to tell the American cattle producer's story to the consumer? We all pay $1 a head for beef promotion and research and marketing. Do you feel that our beef checkoff is connecting our story to the consumer audience?
2 of the 3 important words that you mentioned were promotion and marketing. We're paying a lot of money for those 2 things. I don't see a lot of information out there, and I'm in the dang industry. And so it's frustrating to get questions like, what do you mean it doesn't come from the store? Hey, beef checkoff, that's on you guys. Like, you're supposed to be letting them know where their food comes from, what's in it. That's what we essentially are paying into. And so as a beef producer, it is frustrating because you're seeing an entity that is designed to help promote you not doing that. As somebody who pays into that, like, that's frustrating. It's like, then what exactly am I paying for? I need you to promote and market and help. That's a question I think a lot of ranchers have, is what's the point of you if you're not seeking my best interest or the best interest of this industry? So I would love to see more promotion. I would love to see more marketing. And like Patrice said, if we don't, this is an industry that's not just going to bounce back once it's destroyed.
So your
Yeah,
generation too is also basically the next biggest potential beef buyers in the grocery store. Your generation eats out a lot. Do you think the beef checkoff, I'm going to kind of rephrase that question. Do you think the beef checkoff is targeting your generation with information about beef and how it is raised?
I definitely don't think it is targeting us as a younger generation, because you don't really see, like, again, going on social media, you don't see beef being advertised on social media. Even as a cattle producer, you don't see it. And like, you don't see, like, going to McDonald's, you don't see that it says US beef. You just see, you're not sure, is this even from this country in this store? And half the time you go, is it really beef, or is it just some kind of cheap substitute?
And on this topic, something that the Beef Checkoff recently invested a lot of money in is sponsoring a NASCAR race. I know that you guys can only speak, for your generation and your thoughts on that. Do you think sponsoring a NASCAR race really connected with the American consumer?
If you're going to sponsor something as a beef industry, why don't you sponsor a rodeo? Like,
Right.
sponsor something that has something to do with the industry that you're supposed to be promoting. Because I don't watch NASCAR. I couldn't care less about NASCAR, but I do watch the NFR. I do watch the American. I go to rodeos or, ropings, whatever. And you don't see any marketing or promotion there. Why wouldn't you pick there to be? Because it makes sense, at least to me. I might be wrong. I don't know.
I definitely agree with that, because like, we just had the Winnemucca Ranch Hand Rodeo here this last weekend, and I had somebody come up to me and was like, "Oh my gosh, you look like the real deal." And I was kind of like, well, I am the real deal. I rodeo. I'm in the beef industry. And he was like, but doesn't beef come from the store? And that was one of those, I was like, oh my gosh, you're at a ranch rodeo. And like, I tried to explain to him everything. But yeah, we have those people that they see something going on and they're like, hey, let's go to a rodeo. And we don't have any advertisement of the beef at those kind of things.
Well, and even so I'm going to use the Houston rodeo. You know how many consumers go to the Houston rodeo? A ton. Like half the people in the Houston rodeo arena are not producers. And so that's another perfect opportunity for them. And I'm going to add on to this too I don't think they're targeting our generation at all. When, New York schools just announced that they're doing meatless Mondays and then vegan Fridays. So they're indoctrinating us into this vegan system. Where's the beef checkoff on that? And why are they not doing something to combat that? And yeah, I had to add that in there.
So as we kind of start to wrap up here, let's just peel back the layers. Why are you two a part of RCAF USA? You came to your first convention last year, or I know, Patrice, you've been there a couple of times. Claire, you came to your first one. Tell us why you're a part of RCAF and give those young ranchers listening a little nugget of why they need to get involved with RCAF and our state or local affiliates.
I am definitely part of RCAF because it is the one trade association that actually, it is about the producer. It's not just beef as a whole. It is trying to help us producers. And for young ranchers, I definitely think we need to be in the conversation because we are the future of this industry. And like Claire said, we are the new old generation. And that we need to be able to, like, the older generation needs to see, hey, there are young people on in this industry, and all of our hard work and our fight is not going to be in for vain, really.
Yeah, I agree with Patrice. I'm a part of RCAF because, I went to the convention because I wanted to know more. And for somebody who grew up in, the beef industry as a cattle producer, I learned so much last year. Like, it's kind of phenomenal how you can live in an industry your whole life and kind of only know a slice of the pie. And so I wanted to know more, and I definitely got that. But I also felt respected I felt listened to. And I was surrounded by like-minded people. It wasn't like a young person going to Disneyland, and like, this is cool, where all the cool people live. It's like, no, I was actually at the table, and I had people talking to me, people asking me genuine questions. They weren't asking me because they were bored or they thought I was bored. They were asking because they actually wanted to hear what I had to say. And for young people, that is so important. Like, we're already trying so hard to be taken seriously. It's nice to actually be taken seriously, because this is a serious conversation and we deserve to have a seat at that table, because we've been busting our butts alongside all the older generations. We are there trying to make something out of this industry, trying to keep it around. I don't want to see it disappear. This industry has given me everything that I have. It's given me every opportunity that I have. There's no way I would have left home with the confidence that I could go do something else and come back. And so I definitely think the younger people, if you want to be heard, this is your platform. This is a great place to start. And if you can't get to the convention, go find your local representatives. What they want to know and what they want to see is initiative. It's one thing to sit around at home and be like, I would like to be a part of the conversation. It's a whole other thing to actually get up and go be a part of the conversation. Ask questions and really be in that conversation and argue with people if that's your thing. But be a part of the dang conversation. Don't just talk about it.
This makes me so happy, because one of my biggest goals when I came onto RCAF was to bring the Young Ranchers platform to RCAF. And so it makes me happy that y'all feel heard and y'all feel welcome at our convention and on our platform. And I think, like y'all said, being involved in the conversation, it doesn't mean you have to fly across the country and come to convention, even though we would love for you to do that. But you can get involved on our social media. Social media, podcasts, we have all these platforms that we're trying to get young people involved in the conversation. And I'm going to add on to Karina's question. Why do y'all think people should come to convention?
Definitely come to convention, because like Claire said, you learn so much at convention. Even as a beef producer, you learn more stuff that you wouldn't have learned just at home. And as a young person, you are heard and you are a part of that conversation. You're not just at some conventions where they're just like, whatever, you're a young person, you don't really belong here.
I would definitely say go to a convention, because number one, it's an amazing experience. It just is. It's, you're in this, big hall with a bunch of like-minded people. It's electric. You can feel that everyone is on the same team. And especially if you've been lacking that, like, you just feel like you need to have kind of that camaraderie, you're gonna find it at convention. Plus, it's super cool to get on a plane and like fly across the country and say that you did that summer. But definitely, if you want to feel heard as a young person, go to convention. If you want a platform, go to convention. If you're needing a bolster in confidence, go to convention. I could go on all day here, guys, so stop me whenever you get bored. Definitely, as a young person, go. It might be the only time you do it in your life. You won't regret it, because you'll learn a lot, if not about the industry, about yourself, and what's important to you. So go to convention.
South Dakota is a fun place too. There's lots of stuff to do, and it's in Deadwood, so it'll be extra fun this year. But so to wrap us up, what is y'all's favorite cut of beef, and how do you like it prepared?
All of it.
I kind of agree with Claire there, the whole cow, but I'd probably say a ribeye, and I love it prepared medium rare over a sagebrush fire.
That's very specific. I like it.
I was gonna say a ribeye too, or like a New York strip or T-bone, or really just any of it, like over like barbecue, medium rare. Probably a ribeye. I'm gonna go with Patrice on that one. Probably a ribeye.
Awesome. That is our most common answer, for good reason. So before we get off, any final comments, questions, anything else y'all want to say?
I kind of wanted, like, when we were talking about the social media aspect, if we can figure out, and this is a conversation I'd love to have with more young people, or even people who are older and already in the, RCAF and industry. Like, how do we tackle the social media industry? Because it's already inundated with so much. How do we get heard? How can we kind of rise above a lot of that noise and be heard through that? Because I think once we figure out that, I really think we'll have the opportunity to change how the consumer thinks. But we just kind of got to be louder than some of the loudest people out there who are against us. I just don't know, that's a question I'd ask pretty much anyone, is how do you think that we can accomplish that?
I completely agree with Claire, because there are so many things on social media that are against beef, against the ranching community, that like PETA and all that kind of stuff. Like, how do we be the louder voice in that conversation?
Yeah, and I think that's a conversation worth having, which I don't know if we have time to do it on this episode, but we can certainly do something about that.
Thank y'all so much for talking with us today. We are so thankful to have young ranchers like you involved in RCAP USA. It is so clear the passion these girls share for the ranching industry and Western way of life. I hope our listeners were inspired by this conversation and took away how valuable this upcoming generation of ranchers are and how they too want to be involved in the changes happening in their cattle industry. If you're a young rancher listening, we extend a welcoming hand to come to our platforms and be heard and valued. If you can, come to convention. If that's not feasible, reach out to us on social media and find out how you can be involved in your cattle industry. Whether that be advocating through social media, or researching and being educated on industry topics, or being super involved in cattle associations like sitting on committee chairs. There is a place at the table for young and experienced ranchers alike in our changing industry. So let's all work together to help the cattle industry be prosperous for generations to come and make it possible for more kids to return to the ranch and the beauty of our lifestyle. Thank you so much for listening today, and as always, follow us at RCAP USA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the RCAP USA Roundup. To learn more about RCAP USA, visit our website, www.r-capusa.com.